know, but President was always was president to end the war on the Korean Peninsula. So that means war is not a good experience for us between China and Japan because we suffer quite a lot between China and the Philippines. And the war on the Korean Peninsula we suffer between China and the United States. So this year was the 80th anniversary of the ending the World War II. Of course, this is the great anniversary of 80 years for the victory of the war against the invasion from Japan for us, China, the United States, and the Philippines. So that means because of the war experiences, China, Philippines, United States, we suffered quite a lot in the past, and then we are the labor of ending the war. And right now, I don't think all of us want to once again to wage the war with China because we suffered seriously in the past. So I think that's in this context of the ending of war, China and the United States and the Philippines, will share common ground for maintaining peace with each other and all around the East Asia. So this is the first point I would say with the background in the Columbia University. And the second point, once again, I was mentioning the Columbia University. As you know, right now, there's a quite famous university in Columbia University, whose name is Jeffrey Sachs. Yeah, which is big ties not only in the academic research, but also public research in the United States. He is a great guy to build this great theory for economic recovery or resilience, after the end of the Cold War. So he makes great help for the Russia after the collapse of Soviet Union. So he gave big hand for the resilience of Russia, and now he also discussed and makes a political contribution for the assessment about China. If you Google or you read quite a lot of messages about Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and he made quite a lot of points in his paper, in his presentations online, or even YouTube or X. So he makes a very remarks or point of view that in this world, look at this world. China is on the way right up. There's no any evidence to stop right with China. So China becomes their now we are one of the biggest economy in the world next to the United States. And as Mr. Gao mentioned, that maybe later on China will be the first. So it is inadequate for China to develop, to build up, to become the first economy in the world. But compared to the United States as a hegemonic power, after the end of the Cold War, as you know, Americans as a Western power get used to the traditional historical experience of empire. I'm a historian, actually. So when I study the Western history, there's a very basic logic to find the power build-up. Western power experiences since ancient time. They always follows the way of Roman Empire. As you know, the first emperor of the Roman Empire was named as Tsar. So he has the logic.
Yan nga po mga kabayan, sa mga viewers natin, nandito po tayo sa Maya Shangrila sa BGC, kung saan meron pong forum, the 14th Manila Forum for Philippines-China Relationship to ensuring continuing peace and security in the Asia-Pacific region. Kumbaga po, I think taonan na forum po ito or di ko alam sure, but ito po ay forum para mapanatili po ang kapayapaan sa buong Asia-Pacific kasama na po ang Pilipinas at China. So ayan, pakinggan nyo po, no, nandito po si Atty. Raul Lambino, si dating AFP Chief at General Hermo Menes Esperon, si Lorenzana po nandito rin, at meron pa pong iba. So pakinggan nyo po ang kanilang mga sasalita. Ayan, like po tayo. Ayan pa, like, share, and subscribe po tayo mga kabayan.
So this is used for the way of Western.
Imbitado po kami dito, kaya nandito po kami. After po nito, pupunta kami ng Congress. Imbitado po kami dito. Opo, kaya nandito kami. At yung iba po pong mga vloggers nandito rin. So, ayan po mga kabayan, pakinggan nyo po muna.
So, in my personal observation, Donald Trump still follows the way of Western imperial logic. But it means funding, coming, and counting. So what is the process of this kind of imperial logic taken by the American? So you already know, Donald Trump already declared something like, why not Canada? Could be the 51 states of the United States, right? Or Greenland could be part of the United States and maybe ahead of, in a year ahead, right? Or, neighboring of the United States, like Mexico Bay, could be renamed with the American Bay, right? Or even Mexico could be part of the American economic, scope, to sort of like the United States. Or even, Panama Canal, or even Panama State, to follow the American logic, or other Southern or Caribbean states could be following the American way, so-called controlled by or determined by the so-called New Monroe Doctrine. So this is the American, logic followed by the Western, imperialists in 1,000 years. How about China? Of course, our country shares very long time history, more than 5,000. But as a historian, when I study the Chinese history, particularly the Chinese relation with our neighbors around Asia, it's quite different regarding the basic logic compared with Western power. I always say that in Western society, this is the unilarity in society regarding their knowledge or their logic. That means the whole of the world should be following the one logic, with the one value, with the one model. So the country expanded eventually will be the empire over the world. But Chinese history, in Chinese history, we have different logic. I mean, basic logic, or first principle to define our relation between China and our neighbors. Yes, the duality, not the duality. Duality, that means on one hand, we have the China, but on the other, we have neighborhood. Yes, the two, entity coexist at the same time in issue since ancient time. So the reason why we look around there, history in ancient history, I mean China and the Philippines, we were coexisting with each other for more than 1,000 years, right? Even if very exact facts that 400 years ago, one of the small states on this island, called the Sulu Kingdom. Sulu Kingdom had very close relation with mainland China, 400 years ago. Even if the king of Sulu would like to contribute its territory to be merged into mainland China, I read a historical document in Chinese archives. There's a research document to tell the story like this. Another document written by Chinese emperor, Emperor Qianlong Emperor. So Chinese emperor said that, no, it's not necessary. China is already big enough. So it's necessary to have one more state, to get inside of China. You just keep your position as a king. So this logic tells us that Chinese tensions manage our nation with our neighborhood, and Western power defenses manage their relation with the neighborhood is different. So the basic logic is different between the two kinds of powers in history. And now, compared with Americans, Donald Trump's mindset, he finds North America, or Chinese mindset at the moment, is kind of different. So as Mr. Gauss mentioned that just recent years, Chinese President Xi Jinping has the four initiatives: global development. Development is very important. The first session talking about that, right? And the global security, so security, cultural security, but generally talking quite a lot about cultural security. We should consider to have their value, our Asian value, or Chinese value, which is different with the West. And the fourth, the third is global civilization initiative. So we use their, cultural background, or even sharing common or similar civilization with each other, like East Asia. This is quite diverse regarding their culture, regarding their religion. Well, quite diverse. If our Philippine friends go to inside of China, China is quite diverse regarding our culture, regarding our religion. We accommodate the different kind of religions. For example, of course, the Buddhist culture is our core culture. But we also have quite a lot of population believe in Buddhism. Quite a lot believe in, Muslim. And also quite a lot of Christian inside of China. Even quite a lot of, believes in Catholic religion.
Right. Yeah. Professor, and sorry because we have a very limited time.
Right? So I would say that China is more Asia, and Asia is a big China. So we're sharing kind of a commonality with each other. All right.
Thank you so much. Let's now listen to the former ambassador of Lao for his reaction. For 5-10 minutes for Bill.
Hello. I cannot but immediately respond to Mr. Gau's point regarding artificial intelligence. You say it's not American intelligence, but artificial intelligence. That's not true. Try out AI and begin to use ChatGPT. I asked it, can you explain to me the arbitration in China? It responded, the permanent court of arbitration ruled blah, 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 blah. You know that's not true. It's not the permanent court of arbitration. It was simply an ad hoc panel prosecutor. Okay, so I stand corrected, it says. 2 weeks later, asked another question. It said the permanent court of arbitration ruled such so and so on. So can you check again? And I know this is not true. So I stand corrected. It was an arbitral panel constituted under UTOP. So I got angry. Are you stupid? I thought you're intelligent, but you seem to be stupid. It was violent. And then I asked, by the way, do you read Chinese? No, I don't. Do you read Fuken? No, I don't. Do you read Mandarin? No, I don't. It is a matter of fact that at least the language model of AI doesn't read Chinese text. It reads Chinese text if you give it a particular text in Chinese to translate it. But it doesn't read all of the materials that is the basis of its intelligence. So what's happening is that more and more people are relying on AI rather than Google, and this is being analyzed according to the American biases. So we're having an entire generation believing the American lies. Let me give you an example. You mentioned DeepSeek. So I asked you, does DeepSeek read Chinese media reports? I couldn't find any credible evidence that DeepSeek can read Chinese media reports. Then it even says, DeepSeek exhibits censorship or content moderation, which means it's design judging now that DeepSeek, the Chinese media outfit, AI is accurate. The more important question I just asked it now. I asked it, who are the countries which mainly won World War II? The main victors are the Allied powers, which doesn't include China. First of all, United States, of course. Second, Soviet Union. Third, United Kingdom. Oh, China is only fourth. That's responsible for the victory in World War II. Other significant allies. How would have won the World War? It was subjugated early in the war. My point there is not just to go on this detail, but to point out that the information world, alarmingly, is becoming more and more controlled by the US. This is so true in our country when I've written a book. I've written probably 200 columns on the South China Sea issue. My friends here, Atty and Herman, have written reams of columns on South China Sea issue. But these are never answered by the DFA nor by the President. In fact, if you go to the DFA website and look for the official stand of the Philippines on South China Sea dispute, there's none. The only explanation is on Scarborough Shoal, which is different from what Commodore Cadena or the President himself. If you notice, the President has never explained our dispute with China. Only that is to give one eye to the nations. They will fight for every inch of Philippine territory. Next day says we will defend our exclusive economic zone. It doesn't even know the difference between the easy and territory. So does especially Gilbert Fedoro, heads our defense establishment, but doesn't know the difference between easy and Philippine territory. Can I continue?
Still have 5 minutes.
Which gives me, brings me to another point. My one qualification that wasn't mentioned by Raul is the most important qualification. It is, in this room, all scholars, I have studied the South China issue the longest, for 30 years. The reason being, and of course, the South China Sea is close to my heart, because I could have been the first casualty to conflict in the South China Sea. This happened in 1995 when the Chinese suddenly set up some kind of houses in Michigan, as kind of later white. Now, Ramos, the most Machiavellian of our presidents, had the bright idea. He said, let's bring journalists, foreign journalists, on a helicopter to fly over this street so they can take photos for themselves how the Chinese are infiltrating our territory. So what happened is that they brought about 2 dozen journalists, maybe the youngest. So they put us on LSD. Imagine that they put us on a World War II vintage LSD, which had 2 Huey Vietnam vintage helicopters. And then they brought these groups of journalists over the ship. So we saw the Chinese there, not to the camisetas, short pants, hardly looking Chinese. And we were so proud, we were so adventurous during that time. We said that we admire your innovation, Mr. President. Later on, we realized what was happening. Ramos, I'm sorry, wanted to use this as cannon fodder. Well, years later, in a golf club, I saw one of the generals who landed. He was very apologetic. We didn't know you were in that group of journalists. Because scenario 1 was not for the plane, helicopter to go over Fishy Street and land back on safety. The second scenario was that the Chinese who live there would shoot at us. Because the helicopters were marked press. Who would understand the marking of press? It was a real possibility that we would be shot. And their discussions there is, why not? It would bring this Chinese aggression to life internationally. Now I'm saying this because this is the same tactic the Coast Guard is doing now. They're still insisting the Philippines controls Scarborough Shoal, which we don't anymore. It stays true. They got to control it 12 years ago because the U.S. told them. So the handles please already get back Scarborough Shoal. So what they're doing is that they approach Scarborough Shoal with the Chinese occupying it, hoping that the Chinese will use a real bullet. If that ever happens, it will be international. And with the U.S. control of media, as I explained, China will again that's how. And then one more point, although maybe it will give me some more time later on. Mr. Gao mentioned that for 1,000 years, or 2,000 years, or 1,000 years, what we call the Philippines and China influenced them. So what happened is that we became hostile to China only in the last 9 years. And guess what was that 9 years? 6 years ago, who was so beholden to whose mother, that's her soul, was so beholden to the US. Why? Because without the US, there wouldn't have been people power thing. Without the US, the rebels would have captured the palace in 1989. If you remember, in 1989, during the coup, the Americans sent fighter planes to frighten off the rebel planes. So 6 years of an pro-American president, and then now 3 years of another pro-American president. So the U.S. has held our presidency by the balls, sorry to say, and in this just battle. Now ask me why I think the U.S. has this president holding his votes. Because in 2011, 2011, I think, there's a U.S. court ordering the Marcos family to pay human rights victims $2 billion. This wasn't implemented. All they managed to pay was around 200 million. Less than that. So technically, the Marcos estate, which includes this president, her mother, and everyone in the Marcos family, are impotent. What does that mean? They can be arrested anytime. All their assets could be confiscated. And this is one of the reasons why this president can release his statement of assets and liabilities. As soon as he releases it, and it's a document, some sheriff will garnish it. I'm simplifying it because there were a lot of people who the past government set down, like they claim cannot be claimed by human rights lawyers, but only the Philippine government claimed it. Now what happened? Hawaii court has an expiry date of 10 years. It was extended for another 10 years. The final extension will end in 2031, which means it does not settle, or if Marcos Jr. doesn't follow the U.S. bill, they can do a lot of tricks, claiming before 2031. I hope I said enough for there's no walkout. And I have to emphasize that I'm an expert, I'm a journalist, but I can only speak about facts on the ground. Fascinating are the geopolitics of all this, but reality is that there is peace in ASEAN with all of the ASEAN countries willing to talk to China, right? There's no other ASEAN country that's fighting China, only the Philippines does. And the difficulty there is that if there's some trouble in the South China Sea, the Americans will be forced to intervene. And there goes all of our useful peace.
Thank you. So thank you, Ambassador Mila. Now we listen to our last reactor, Director Dino of the Research for Center for International Green Issues. He is from Hainan province.
Yes.
And Hainan is quite close to us. It's the closest island in Philippines, and it's also the venue for the yearly BOA Forum, where our late President Fidel Ramos was the founding chairman of the BOA Forum, and our former President Royal Arroyo is still an active director of the BOA Forum. So let's hear from there.
Thank you, Chair. And first, I would like to express my thanks to the organizers for having me here to share my opinions. And since I'm the youngest man here, obviously, I would like to express my respects and thanks for all the senior speakers and moderators for the contributions to the friendship between China and the Philippines peoples. And if you allow me, I would like to start with my discussion, true story of my. So, people know me and my wife. My wife, she is working in the same institute, the National Institute for Social Assistance. So sometimes we talk about social issues at home. So one day, my son, 6 years old, he told me, Father, Dad, I won't travel to the Philippines. I asked him why. He said, I know there is some conflicts in the South China Sea and sea. So at that moment, I realized, I talked to my wife, we should not talk about the South China Sea issue, talk about our work at home in front of my son. Why? Because I don't want the South China Sea issue define the next generation's impression to our neighborhood. That means the South China Sea issue should also not define the bilateral relationship of the two countries. That is also the consensus between the two leaders of our two countries. So today I would like to talk about the South China Sea situation, generally speaking. So from my view, the peace and stability in the South China Sea right now is maintained. There are lots of examples and reasons. Number one, there is no new occupation to the islands and reefs for the past 20 years. Number two, there is no armed conflict. There is no war. And number three, the commercial, the navigation safety and the freedom has not been interrupted by the disputes or by the incident. And another example is the COC consultation negotiation has been conducted smoothly, and there is some hope for all the parties to get an agreement next year. So, and China and ASEAN countries have made proof important achievement, and the DOC framework has to do regarding to the low sensitive maritime function and cooperation, such as maritime environmental protection, search and rescue, and other things. So such positive factors, I think, is the mainstream of the South China Sea issue. And the reason is that all the members, all the coastal states, including China, they are made a great effort on this. So if you give me 3 points, I think should share with all the audience. The first one is that the regional states in the around the South China Sea, they have the same, they have the common wish, consensus to keep the South China Sea as a stability and peaceful place. And the second is that the dual track 2 program approach, that means the disputes should be handled and resolved by the directly involved parties by negotiation and consultation, and the stability and peace of the South China Sea should be maintained by China and ASEAN members. This approach is still useful, cannot be given up. And the third thing is that we should have the confidence. We should have seen the mainstream of the South China Sea issue to believe China and the dispute parties can be kind of refine some proper ways to handle the disputes, and we should have the confidence that China and the ASEAN countries can maintain the business stability and the COC. So that is the positive issue. So if I have some time, I will talk about the risk and the challenges. But that depends on our time and the next round of discussion. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we are going to entertain 5 questions from the audience. But first, I'm going to have the first question. That's the moderator. Sorry. Well, in the discussions that we had, we heard of Professor Gao, General Esperon, and the other panelists here. Now, in recent weeks, there's been a marked escalation of tension in the disputed waters in South China Sea. which has been described as open quote, a simmering cauldron of territorial and maritime disputes, unquote. There's the spectacle also of Philippine military drills with the United States and their allies, which followed Western Coast encounters between vessels of the Chinese Coast Guard and their maritime militia and the Philippine Coast Guard. Now, amid the disturbing headlines, it has been argued that the best chance for keeping the peace now rests on a pragmatic solution that binds all parties to the adherence to international law and the promotion of respect between the claimants. My first question is directed to General Esperon, sir. How, for instance, do we even begin to imagine the basic architecture for an enduring peace in a climate of heightened tension and suspicion? And how can the concepts of dialogue and cooperation, which have seemingly fallen into disfavor amid mutual distrust, be reintroduced in the current question? That is my question to you, sir. And my second question is directed to Professor Galvin. And how could the notion of a shared prosperity for all neighbors, a notion China has nurtured since the last decade, be made to fit into this design of peace? General Esperon first.
Thank you.
How can the concepts of dialogue and cooperation, which have seemingly fallen into disfavor amid mutual distrust, be reintroduced in the current situation?
Whether we like it or not, we will have to revert to the number one instrument of national power, that is diplomacy. We cannot engage each other militarily. As I said, I even said that if we are internally weak, then we may not engage, even in diplomacy. But then again, you will have to revert to diplomacy by all means, because it will be the first tool that you can have, even if you are weak. What I'm saying is, while we recognize the South China Sea as a probable flashpoint, and it could be the source of misunderstanding between the Philippines and China, we must understand that the West Philippine Sea is not the sum total of our relations with China. In other words, there are other things that we should consider, including trade, which is very important, cultural, people to people, including tourism. There are other things that we must consider. And therefore, the position of the Philippines under President Duterte was always friend to all, enemy to no one. In other words, friendships and enemies are not absolute. In fact, the preference will be friendship. But then again, it is in the national interest that you should also protect your sovereignty and territorial integrity and your sovereign rights. In this case, sovereign rights given by UNCLOS provisions. Territory as defined by whether it's Treaty of Paris or the Korean. And of course, your sovereignty. That is why you have to put up your defense forces, your military. But you must calibrate this, because if you don't have the means, then military as an instrument should not be the first priority. It must revert back to diplomacy. And it is happening now. It is happening now. In fact, despite all the challenges in the West Philippine Sea, we are still continuing the dialogue for the Code of Conduct. And hopefully, despite the years that have been there, I think it's since 2012, we still hope that there will be a final Code of Conduct that is enforceable, so that that can become the basis for mutual understanding on what should be done in the West Philippine Sea. But personally, let me say this. Even if we spend 100 years or 1,000 years, we cannot solve the differences in the South China Sea if we insist on territorial claims. Just imagine this. We have 17 islands of Vietnam right inside our EEZ. And they are building or strengthening their positions there. There are 5 People's Republic of China positions there and 2 others outside our EEZ, but it used to be part of what we call the Kalayaan Island Group, which is a municipality of Panama. Malaysia has 5 islands there in our EEZ. And before I forget, Taiwan still occupies what used to be the originally biggest island there, Taipei, or I forgot the Chinese name for that. Taipei. And Brunei has 1. So what do you mean? When people shout, that's our territory, that's our place, that's ours. Are you telling me that we should tell Vietnam, okay? We remember it went to war with China. But they're friends now, or maybe even earlier. You mean to tell me we'll tell Malaysia to get out from their 5 islands because we are claiming? Or do you want to tell me also that we all get out of there because that's China territory? I don't think we could solve it by claiming territories there, but we can have agreements that could benefit us all. For example, what do you think about having a marine biology research, international research site in Pag-asa Island? Everybody's welcome. What do you think if we start talking about fisheries agreement so that China will not take their off-season here in places that we claim? So maybe we can concentrate on what is doable. Because I believe claiming the territory for ourselves or part thereof would not settle the matter. We all believe in the importance of the South China Sea. It is where world trade of about 3 trillion or about 1/3 of the world trade passes there or more. So let it be a body of water that should give benefits to one and all. Well, as Mr. Ka said, I do not know if you're claiming that the United States wants war, but China doesn't want war. Well, I'm happy that at least China and the United States are talking. Even if they are talking for now only about tariff of tariff rates. But I know that you are talking to each other. Trade is so important between the two. That only demonstrates that we should also be talking trade with the United States and China. Personally, how could I hate the United States? I have relatives there. How could I hate China? I love your cuisine. I love going to places in China. So I think there is so much to say about peace between us rather than talking about our territories. Maybe the wisdom of the Filipinos and Chinese in 100 years will solve the problem of territorial dispute. But for now, let's talk about other matters. Continue talking. Maybe we could settle a lot of things as we are doing here right now. This is a very good start. The Association for Philippine-China Understanding is a very good organization. I wish our members.
You are most welcome, sir, to become a member of APCO.
Good luck to you and thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, General Esperon, for emphasizing the importance of independent foreign policy, which is enshrined in our Constitution. Thank you also for emphasizing the importance of dialogue, consultation, consensus, which are enshrined in the joint communique that was signed by the Philippines and China in the diplomatic relations established in 1975 in order to resolve possible disputes between the two countries. Despite the pronouncements now of some high-ranking officials of the Philippine government that they are tired of listening to all these claims or whatever dialogues coming from the People's Republic of China. And I do believe, as many Filipinos believe, that diplomacy would still be the number one factor in resolving whatever disputes we have with China or any other claimant countries in the South China Sea. And now let's go to the professor. And may I reiterate the earlier question that I asked? How could the notion of a shared prosperity for all neighbors, a notion China has nurtured since the last decade, be made to fit into this design for peace, global development initiative, global security initiative, global civilization? Thank you very much. I listened very carefully to all the panelists and the general. I agree with many of the remarks they made. Now, when I look at the South China Sea, the worst that can happen is that it becomes a sea of war and conflict, and it becomes such a burden on the future generations of all our people, Chinese people, Filipino people, etc. That is something that we want to avoid. Now, the best case scenario is actually not that difficult. You may know I used to be the General Counsel of China National Offshore Oil Company, which is the offshore oil development in China. It is responsible for all the offshore area in China, including in South China Sea. Now, you may remember when China opened up the offshore area for exploitation in the 1980s. At that time, China didn't have the money to explore for oil or gas. China didn't have the technology, and China didn't have the equipment. Now China has all of this in that right. So at that time, there is one very simple concept. It's called a PSA, Production Sharing Agreement, which is a standard agreement in the oil and gas exploration and production area. Meaning, if I'm the landlord, if I have the entitlement, but I don't have the money or have the technology, I can create a cooperation with foreign producer on a 50-50 basis. It's 50-50. And if the foreign developer comes in with all the money and it starts to drill oil for oil or gas, and discovers nothing, that developer will be responsible for all the losses. Basically, it walks away with all the losses. If it's lucky and discovers all the oil and gas reserves, then everything that is being produced will need to pay off the cost upfront first. So it pays off all the costs. And then until the developer recovers all the costs, then it goes to 50-50 distribution. You can walk away with the 50% of the profit or the revenue, or you can walk away with the 50% production of oil or gas. Now, I think when I look at the disputed areas between China and the Philippines, or between China and Vietnam, and to a much lesser extent between China and Malaysia, and almost to zero between China and Indonesia, for example, actually the best way to solve the problem is that while each of us will continue to have our territorial position, and it may or may not be difficult to solve them tomorrow or in the coming year, we can actually start focusing on producing the oil and gas reserves on a cooperation basis. It's very similar to production sharing basis. In that case, for example, Philippines will immediately get the benefit of the produced oil and gas reserve. It will really contribute to making for whatever energy shortage Philippines has. And I understand Philippines does not have enough imported oil or gas for generation of power. You may actually have shortage of power in the country. And this is actually one of the reasons why manufacturing is not growing that fast in the Philippines. And when we are talking about the AI revolution, you will need tremendous amount of power if you really want to be a player in AI revolution. So I think the Philippines cannot wait for power to be generated. You need to act right now. So one way to do it is to, for example, to fight for the disputed territories, for example. Or the other way is that we can cooperate on peaceful basis, and we can share the production of the oil and the gas reserves for our mutual benefit. You may say this is easy said than done, but I think we will need to be creative. We need to really engage with each other for common prosperity. Now, allow me to add very briefly. If you look at the South China Sea, do you know what really stands out? Coral reefs. South China Sea has the largest collection of coral reefs compared with any other body of water in the world. So these coral reefs need to be protected through international cooperation. The coral reefs don't recognize Filipino or Chinese or Vietnamese boundary. They actually exist in their own capacity. Now, the other way is very obvious. Navigation, for example, disaster relief, disaster measures, satellite images, for example, and all the other things, weather monitoring, etc. I think for all these other things which are not disputed, we can really work together. And different member states in this region can really pitch in with your money or with your technological know-how, etc., and making sure that the South China Sea will really be an area of peace and cooperation, rather than what we keep talking about, war and war and war. That's not the best solution for our generation or for the future generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. May I ask Ambassador Tigaw to make a quick reaction? Just on that, Mr. Gao, that ship about shared production has sailed to them. You don't remember that in 2012, Felix Exploration, owned by the MVP Group, but really owned by Sally Division, entered into such talks with Sino. But what did Felix do? He said that it suddenly sent its own exploratory survey ship into the reef. In fact, that's what started the 12 problems. And after that, I don't talk to the Sinop people again. No? They were criticized by the Communist Party. They were fooled by it. We were told never enter such agreement again. And now we have so-called Filipino nationalists claiming that we can never give up our sovereignty through joint exploration. Maybe it would be, as I said, another president is not political will to do that. Kasi my question, last point na road is this one. Forums like this always move into generalities, modest statements. But let's just watch what Vietnam is doing. Well, Vietnam keeps insisting on their rights. They're quiet. But then they've been building more artificial islands now. In our case, we spent 30 billion for the Senate building, but they cannot spend that much to renovate the airport at Pagasa. I mean, that's the problem really. The problem is in our needs.
30 million for that Senate building that's not yet usable, and a trillion plus for the uncontrolled projects. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Well, from the statements of General Esperon and I'm very proud of listening about your concept of production sharing agreement and about the proposal of General Esperon about possible venture arrangement of how we can cooperate with the other claimant states. We lawyers who are here understand the concept of condominium law. And I see some developers here of condominium units, and they know pretty well the meaning of the concept of condominium. I think this is one area possibly that we can also explore. I think the Department of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China can start considering expanded notion of condominium, and perhaps this could help resolve the conflict or dispute between the Philippines and China, which General Esperon said we cannot resolve that in 100 years or even 1,000 years. But if we can adopt the condominium concept of our relationship, we can possibly enjoy the fruits of the disputed waters in South China Sea. So, anyone who would like to ask a question?
I have the privilege
Yes.
of coming on to the mic.
Yes, Mr. Herbert Tulona. You can direct the question to anyone. So please identify yourself and then direct your question to any one of our panelists.
Yes, I'm from the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. And of course, I've been debating this, discussing this, and we've been writing about this South China Sea dispute between China and the Philippines for the past 15 years, as both Ikaw has mentioned earlier. But I think the bottom line is very simple. If the Americans were not allowed to reassert its dominance in Philippine politics, we would not have a problem. Because the suggestions for joint development and so on has been there, signed between President Duterte and President Xi Jinping since 2017. Unfortunately, we got interrupted by the new administration in 2022-2023, and we have this mess. But the mess is now visiting his own office in Malacanang today. But I wanted to bring this up to particularly Victor Brown, because this offers a bit of a ray of light, a bit of hope. As the Political American magazine reported in Newsweek in Manila magazine, after the Tianjin summit and the September 3 victory parade of China, U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth announced to the American audience, and in this headline of Political, Pentagon plan prioritizes homeland over China threat. Given your exposure almost every day, I can see on YouTube and discussions, Mr. Victor Brown. What is your sense? What is the chances of this becoming a real strategic direction of the United States? Or withdrawing from China, from Asia, concentrating on its own land? Unfortunately,
On the ground here in the Philippines, we see I assume to be the deep state, not conforming to the Trump administration's pronouncement of withdrawing from the conflict with political China. And we are seeing the biggest arms depot in Asia being built up in Subic, and so on and so forth, the Asian NATO being propagandized, at least not in reality, actually being done. What is your sense?
Thank you very much. Allow me to be very quick. I know other panelists want to contribute their views. First of all, I was doing live commentary when the victory parade was happening in Beijing. I was doing that in the CCTV headquarters. And my impression, allow me to share this with you, that the victory parade of September the 3rd will be judged by history as a major turning point. Because what China demonstrated will convince everyone who cares to watch this in the world that China now enjoys military superiority above the United States. And the Americans may not agree with me, but when you look at the conventional weapons as well as nuclear weapons, China is not next to the United States. China is actually ahead of the United States. This is very profound, and it will take time to sink in. But that leads to a very important next question. That is, whether the United States wants to pick up a war against China. Let me tell you, as I mentioned, inevitability of peace between China and the United States. Does that mean the United States will not kind of challenge China? No, they will continue to challenge China. Do you know through what means? Through using proxies. They want to turn the Philippines into a proxy. They want to push the Philippines to the forefront, to instigate a war between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea, and the United States hides in the background, and it does not suffer any casualty. The casualties will be either the Chinese on the Chinese side or the Filipinos on the Filipino side. That would be very, very dangerous. There is another potential proxy. That is the separatists in Taiwan. The Americans want to push the separatists in Taiwan to the forefront, to instigate a war between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. Now, other than that, I don't think any general or admiral in Washington will really go in that direction of instigating a direct war with China. Because, let me share with you, after the Korean War, it is a consensus in Washington that the United States does not want to fight a ground war with China anymore. They are sickened by the casualties suffered by the Americans on the Korean Peninsula, because they learned the lessons in the Vietnam War, and the Philippines was very much involved in the Vietnam War because the Americans used the Philippines as the naval base, as the air base, etc. China said, don't cross parallel 17. Let me tell you, the Americans never crossed above the parallel 17. China drew a line, and the Americans didn't move 1 inch above parallel 17. That was in the 1960s. That was in the 1970s. Now, allow me to share with you. If you watch the aerial battle between the Pakistanis and the Indians, and I know both of them very well, they both talked about Victor Gao as being very influential when I talked with them on Indian TV and on Pakistani TV. Listen, the Indians suffered losses. President Trump said 6 of your planes were shut down, or even 7, and Pakistani didn't suffer any loss. Do you know why? Because Pakistanis now are very advanced vis-a-vis the Indians, because they use all the military equipment either exported by China to Pakistan or jointly produced between China and Pakistan, to such an extent that India is very much disadvantaged. Why? Because the Pakistanis have learned from the Chinese cooperation that they need to integrate what I say, the space, the sky, that is the Air Force, the ground, that is the Army, and the surface water, that is the Navy,
and the submarine, 5 dimensions integrated into one seamless fighting dimension, aided and enabled by information technology and AI. So the Pakistanis now can see further than the Indians, and their missile can shoot further than the Indians. The Indians could not see the incoming planes on the Pakistani side, and they could not see any missile coming because they were not as instantaneously integrated. When you watched the parade in Tiananmen Square on September the 3rd, you saw the troops, the soldiers, the generals, and the military trucks, the missiles, etc., one by one. But in real battle, they do not perform in each capacity. They are merged into a fighting machine. Allow me to share with you my true observation. China has the best technology now in the world to integrate all these dimensions together into one seamless fighting chain of command. Now the Americans actually panic because they keep saying they can no longer build naval ships. Their production of shipbuilding is only 1% of China. And they do not have enough rare earth. You know, now many countries talk about their rare earth. Myanmar talks about rare earth. Pakistan talks about they have rare earth. Iran talks about they have rare earth. Turkey says, I have rare earth. But if you really know the truth, to have the rare earth does not solve the problem. You need to extract the rare earth elements from the other minerals, which they actually coexist, and then refine them. Now, if China does not discontinue choking the Americans in the neck, the Americans are running out of rare earth reserves. They will no longer be able to produce their missiles or the phantom planes, etc., the killing machine that they need to, be involved in any war in the world. So I think we are at a crossroad already, and we already gone beyond the point of no return. That is, the United States has come to the conclusion that it is futile to fight a war with China. And it is actually, they are thinking about using some proxy. Philippines a proxy. Taiwan is a proxy. What else? Do you think India will be a proxy? Let me share with you my observation. After the Pakistani-Indian aero battle, the minimum will take 10 years for India to recover. Really, India is a great country. I admire India very much. But I don't think they want to really find themselves in another war, especially aerial war between India and Pakistan, because they now realize they are very much disadvantaged for lack of technology and lack of this integrated command system. That is the reality. I think I'm a realist, I'm a very pragmatic person, and I'm here very honored, and I feel myself very much privileged, and I want to share my truth with you, whatever I really understand. And I do not come to Philippines alone, I travel around the world, really. And I want to say, between China and the Philippines, really being friends would be the better approach. Let's talk about peace. None of us should wear war on our lips. If you listen to China, China never talks about war. China always talks about peace. And I think it is peace that will be the most important thing. China has tried its best to convince the Americans, talk about peace with me. Don't talk about war with me. Because if you talk about war with me, you will be beaten. You will lose the next war as you lost the war in the Korean War. And that will be probably, the Americans probably will find that very much unacceptable. But let's really embrace peace. That's my fundamental point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gao. I'm reminded of, Secretary Lawrence, I think he was the Defense Secretary, and Secretary Esperon was National Security Advisor, and me, being President's Advisor for Northern Luzon. And we all come from the region. We speak the lingua franca of the North, which is Ilocano. And we were discussing about how we can help modernize the armed forces of the Philippines, which Secretary Esperon in his presentation made necessity, indispensability of having really a strong military force. And we were hoping that the Philippines would soon develop its own weapons and ordnance, by not just relying on importing weapons other countries from the US and now from India, from Korea, and from Indonesia. And the three of us were thinking of putting up a place which we are going to call a special economic zone for the development of weapons and armaments in the Philippines. And I was starting to review the foreign incentive law or the investment act. And we are trying to remove all those red lines there. And unfortunately, instead of the Philippines developing its own missile system, we opted to buy Indian-made missiles. It's called BrahMos. And sadly, recently when the president visited India, I don't know what was committed again to be bought by the Philippines. But anyway, thank you for the question, Mr. Herman Chilogan, one of our trustees. Any question from the audience? Anyone? Orion Perez? Yeah. Please give the microphone to Mr. Perez.
嗨，大家好，对我们的中国朋友，我就告诉你们欢迎光临。Anyway, so what I'm about to say is not really.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, my name is Orion Perez. Yeah, my name is Orion Perez, and I am a constitutional reform advocate, just like my friend Lambino and the other friend here, Dinto Donato. I wanted to make a comment first before I ask my question. And the first comment I wanted to make was about a Facebook post that a Facebook friend of mine made. He's retired General Romeo Popis. And he actually commented about how other countries in Asia, particularly Malaysia and Vietnam, actually have their own conflicts with China as well. And yet, they were able to set aside whatever conflicts they have and still be able to be friendly with China on areas of trade. And in that sense, they were able to join in, for example, as observer status in BRICS and things like that, which would actually really enhance their economy. And quite unfortunately, in our case in the Philippines, we haven't really been able to do that. We're so one-sided and all that. And because of a lot of whatever conflicts occur, we don't have the finesse of looking at a modus vivendi. It's always kicking and screaming and making a lot of noise and not really trying to engage. And I responded to my friend, General Popis, thinking, perhaps one of our problems in the Philippines is we are the only country in ASEAN that does not share any land border with any other country at all. We are the only totally isolated archipelago. Everyone else, Malaysia, we share borders with Thailand, they share borders on the island of Borneo. Indonesia, they share so many borders with so many other countries, etc., etc. But we in the Philippines, we have none of that. And as a result, we've never had a solid history of having to maintain friendly relations, or at least a modus vivendi with a next door neighbor who you may disagree with, but you will still have to live with because of the border that you have. So I don't know, that might be partly it. This is not to disparage our friends at the DFA, because this is just the reality of our history. We never had to really deal with an absolutely just right next door type of neighbor. So, based on that, my question is really for anyone in the panel. how can we improve this situation internally so that we can approach things with more finesse, so that yes, we may have our so-called territorial disputes or disagreements on certain things, but still be able to forge a positive relationship regarding economic development, trade, so that we can also partake in developments around the world and in the region. Thank you very much. Yeah, please.
All right, I'd like to give some answers to your question. Please, your quick question to me, right? Actually, as Chinese foreign policy researchers, I want to focus on Taiwan neighborhood, in particular around the South China Sea. So in the past 1 year, I traveled around South China Sea. Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, of course, now in Philippines. So when I was in the trip to these areas around South China Sea, so that made me very deep impression when I was in that countries. Like in Indonesia, I take the high-speed train from Jakarta to Bandung. So always discuss about some kind of business cooperation with China. It's hot topic for the issue in China and Indonesia. And when I was in Malaysia, so I was invited to visit the Xingshan city next door to Singapore. They don't discuss quite about how to build the new model in Malaysia. With some sharing some features of Chinese model, so-called Shenzhen economic special zone. So they want to learn always to find towards the investment from China to be able to connect Shenzhen following the Chinese way. And the one was in Vietnam actually just 2 months ago. So in Hotline, in Da Nang, in Ho Chi Minh City. So Chinese Vietnamese politicians or even the local government officers talk to me regarding how to build their local, economic resilience. Just this year, there's a big, not only economic but also the local political or administrative reforms in China, Vietnam, right? So our Vietnamese say that, well, we should think something more beyond the traditional pattern of so-called open up reforms in Vietnam. But they say that, well, we should learn something from Chinese model, so-called governance. Chinese governance, because in the past, Vietnamese always try to set a special model, which is different with Chinese, right? Not only focus on the economy, but also focus on their political diversity, right? But now, Vietnamese are aware they should have some kind of contribute on not only their political reform, but more important than economic. Without economic development, there is no solid foundation for the national resilience. So I think that's even. I arrived here last night. Talked some of our Chinese diplomats this morning. So even I was interviewed by the Chinese Vietnamese Filipino journalists. So they also say to me that Philippines, even though the hotspot is South China Sea, security relation is always on the headline for the discussion or even something in this regard. But regarding the society, inside the society of Philippines, or even the business circle, the concern much more on the economic or trade relation, or even the investment from China or from other ASEAN members. So that means maybe essentially for any nations in this region or East Asia or Southeast Asia, the economic development is critical concern by the ordinary people. by the society. Without economic development, maybe there will be some kind of uncertain or even equalized phenomenon in the society. So that will make some trouble in the society. And so the reason why somehow in the South Asia or even somehow in some country in Southeast Asia, maybe you know that. Now even inside the Philippine society, there's some kind of uncertainty, right? So I think if even China will aware that we should not focus on our economic development. Otherwise, inside of Chinese society will be some kind of problem. So I think that's a big choice for their government, for the sector of society, or even for the business, the economic development. Critical choice. So I think that's the Chinese experience. Like Mr. Gao talking about Deng Xiaoping in the past 40 years. So China wants to focus on the economy, and then we have the foundation for our national security, safeguard. I think that's in this equation, China and for our Filipino friends, maybe they try to enhance our economic cooperation or try to share our exchange at a societal level. So my university, I have two universities. One is my home university, Shangrila University, and now I already have a second job that is the Regular University of China, the University of Beijing. So our university will actually open the door to the scholar or even part researcher for exchange field with us to try and even share their national governments, their regional governments, or the global governments, initiative by the Chinese leaders a few weeks ago, by Chinese Xi Jinping, right? So I think that's the key word here is governments, national governments, regional governments, of course, the governments of South China is critical for us.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah. Ambassador Taylor, you want to respond?
Yes, it's one point. That analysis is so wrong. Ramos had the capacity to deal with both China and US. Gloria Macapagal did so too. Estrada even did that too. Duterte did that too to balance China. And so I think that analysis is wrong. The big difference is that when you have presidents who are so much American puppets, that's when things go. And look around the world, Britain doesn't share any landmass with any other country, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, but they don't have a gentleman's, I think, convoluted analysis.
So thank you. Any other question? If there's none, can I have this lady in? Yeah, please introduce yourself.
I think I need to respond somehow. My name is Princess Agastayao. I'm the Director for North Asia, Division of the Focus of Asia Pacific Affairs of the Department of Foreign Affairs. I just assumed this. Okay, just to point out, the Philippines will always pursue its own interests based on its own priorities and sovereignty and national interest. That is the primary. We will always follow that, regardless of who we deal with. Our own national interests will always prevail. Nonetheless, taking off from the point of the former national security advisor, we will always pursue areas where our interests align. So that is, of course, what the gentleman over there mentioned. That is on trade. Maybe unbeknownst to all, despite all the issues that you now see on the television, all these differences that we have on so many security issues, we cooperate with China in our bilateral relations is very strong. Okay, it encompasses the security issues. Okay, we have trade relations, we have security ties, we have the cultural relations, which is very strong. The ties between our countries, between our peoples remain, regardless of the issues that face between the two countries. Filipino-Chinese relations, people-to-people relations, cultural relations, these are the basis of also of Philippine-China relations. So I just want to point that out. Okay, we will always pursue our national interest based on our priorities. We will always engage with China as an equal partner. We will engage with the US. We will engage with each and every ASEAN member countries, including our neighbors. They're not neighbors, but countries in Europe. We are equal partners, and we will always be guided by the principle that our independent foreign policy based on our national interests. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that comment, Mama, from the Department of Foreign Affairs. Well, actually, yes, we have to continue our strong cultural exchanges, people-to-people exchanges, and even tourism. And that is actually the primary mission of Apple. We have been doing that for more than 50 years since our organization was founded and registered legally. And the sad part, however, is that very recently we observed that there are more Filipinos going to China now as tourists, spending money there in China, than Chinese tourists coming into the Philippines. I was in Sichuan and Chongqing just 2 days ago. I arrived in the Philippines. When I traveled from Manila to Chengdu, state flight from through Air China, there were more Filipinos in the plane going to Chengdu. And when I came back yesterday morning, again, there were more Filipinos coming home from China. And then I asked them, what made you travel to China? But we enjoy going to China because it's cheap, the hotels are cheap, the food are delicious, they're very cheap, a lot of cities that you can see. That was a different situation 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there were a lot of flights from Chengdu to Manila, Guangzhou to Manila, Xiamen to Manila, Quezon to Manila, Beijing to Manila, full of Chinese tourists who would like to come to the Philippines. Why the sudden shift from China? And they didn't know the reason why. What's the reason? They're afraid. According to the Chinese, Mr. Samuel, can you respond to that, sir? As the president of Chinese Business Association, the Chinese Business from Shangrila.
They're issuing less visas now.
I really don't know.
Who told you that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that may be what it's doing. But I think they really are not applying anymore for Chinese, for Filipino visas to come to the Philippines as tourists. Maybe the Philippine Chinese Business Association.
I have another question. I'm somewhere away from the Chinese Filipino Business Club Inc. Actually, my observation of what's going around in the country, because we're looking at the South China Sea, but we have to bring ourselves back to the country. My observation is every day we read the newspaper, we listen to commentators on the radio, they are majority, they are anti-Chinese. And I'm saddened because I raise my eyes is thinking, everywhere I go, I don't want to experience that racism. I did experience it already. And what's going on here? Now it's not only me, even our business is affected. Just an example, a week ago, our supplier, 3 of them came over from China. One is good with English, but the other 2, technicians, trainers, they didn't know how to speak English. So one was allowed to come in, but the other two were detained. After 2 days, because it's a weekend, so I was trying to ask for some help from friends. The two were so scared that they decided to buy ticket and went back to China, went back home to China. I said, these things are young adults. Somehow now, even the Filipinos, they are affected with what is being planted. These seeds, when we allow them to be planted, a month, a year later, people, Filipino people, they will feel so bullied. And that sense of fear is growing already in them. Instead of our natural values, the natural values of Filipinos who are loving, kind, friendly, something is changing. What can we do to reverse this kind of wrong seeds that were planted in the young minds and into the minds of our Filipinos?
So I want to respond, Ambassador. Definition of one point, because you might want to investigate this. 3 months ago, I was told that our embassy in Beijing was issuing 1/3 of visas than before. When I talked to the ambassador, a good friend of mine, a former journalist, he was blaming some technical thing. Your observance is that there are more Filipinos going to China because our embassy in Manila, in Beijing, is
If I may add a point, if you look at ASEAN now, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore already offer visa exemption to Chinese nationals. So anyone in China, just buy a ticket and fly to Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. They do not need a visa. That's number one. Currently, the Philippines is still a little bit inconvenient. But allow me to make one point for the Filipino people. When you look at China, let me tell you, how do you look at China? First of all, China now has money. Back 40 years ago, China didn't have money. Any Filipino going to Beijing buying dollar on the day will be treated as a king at that time. Really? Because we thought about Filipinos, especially Chinese Filipinos, have money at that time. But now China does have a lot of money. China can make huge investments. Look at the BRI. China made investments in all the countries in the world. Why shouldn't China make investment here in the Philippines? So look at China and say, I want to get Chinese investment, number one. Then, when you want to build up connectivity, highways, railways, etc., China can do that faster with better quality and with lower budget. That's number two. Number three is that if you have anything to sell, mango, for example, durian, whatever, seafood, whatever you produce in the Philippines, sell to China. China has the largest market, larger than that of the United States, and much closer than the US market. So, from whatever angle, look at China and try to get some benefit of engaging with China. The China does not want to say, I won't get all the benefits from the Filipinos. Next month, I will be in Shanghai attending the China International Import Exposition. China is the only country in the world which hosts a big exposition for all the imports from different countries. I want to see Filipino friends go to Shanghai, showcase whatever you can sell to the China market, make a lot of money out of the China market. Now, the other thing is that if the Philippines really wants to build up connectivity of any kind, of all kinds, work with China. And I want to end my remarks by saying the real choice for Philippines is not choosing between China or the United States. The real choice is to make up your mind as to whether the United States is doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and whether China is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. If the United States is doing the right thing, why don't you want to work with the United States? But if the United States is doing the wrong thing, why do you want to work with the United States? Likewise for China, if China is doing the right thing, why don't you want to work with China, benefit from working with China? And if China is doing the wrong thing, of course, you will know what to do with China if China does the wrong thing. So that is the real choice. Don't be forced into a dilemma of picking and choosing between China and the United States, because China and the United States are now the two largest economies in the world. You want to have benefits from both China and the United States, rather than having one but by excluding the others. That will be a much better policy for the Filipino brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I agree with the just like Secretary Esperon, he loves the United States. I love the United States too. My children were all the school that educated in the United States as well. So, last question before we conclude.
Nonetheless, let me just
Kasi wala
say
po
this.
marami nag-i-interest ng Diyos.
It is, I will start from the definition of national security. National security is a state or condition where the general welfare and the well-being of the people, the government institutions, the territory, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and the culture of the Philippines are all protected and enhanced. Anything that will not protect or endanger all these aspirations will elicit a response from the public. For example, if a problem is on territory, then therefore the response would be about building your own forces to defend that territory. What I am saying is, it is the right of any country to take action where its national interest is on the line. Is on the line. I think that's no different from China. It has its right to build up its forces. It has its right to its own kind of diplomacy. Just like any other country. The United States has its own kind of diplomacy, has its own kind of military. All because they have their national interest to protect or enhance. Therefore, if there is a conflict of interest, then you will always expect some disagreements, if not aggression, or some unfriendly actions. Despite of that reality, we must come to realize that no country will be the victor or the winner if it resorts, if it believes that it should live in violence, in the use of violence, or in the conduct of war. What should come primarily the first, as I presented our instruments of national policy, of national power, is diplomacy. Diplomacy. Number 8 there was development. But I have my thoughts that together with economy and development, they must be at the forefront. And so, we are countries, but no country is an island. We must also be sensitive about the interest of the other countries, and each and everyone should be encouraged to be also sensitive of the opposite side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. One last question before we conclude this forum. Yes, the gentleman here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Captain Atty. Jose Jr. an ex-seafarer. I sailed around the world for 25 years. I became a captain for 8 years. A shipbuilding supervisor in Korea and China for 5 years. Before I stopped sailing at age 45 and started my own money and ship management company here in Manila. At the moment, I am the president and CEO of GMM Global Maritime Manila and GNS Global Maritime Ship Management. I really appreciate our panels this afternoon, especially Mr. Gao and of course my great old friend Sir Lambino and of course General Esperon. We are keep on talking about peace and security, and I always believe that we need the development and the diplomacy to have that. But as a seafarer, for 25 years and as a captain for 8 years, I always respect that in each country, before anything else, we have to secure our maritime territory. The Philippines is an archipelagic country with 7,600 islands. And believe me, as a captain, I observed that the Philippines do not secure our entire country with our maritime territory. We lack one, maritime buoys. We do not have that. 2, lighthouses. I hope everybody can understand what I'm talking about because I am a seafarer, I am a seaman. Would you believe, for example, that the Philippines, as an archipelagic country with 7,600 islands, we have 22 existing lighthouses. As compared to Taiwan, which is only 36,000 square kilometers, an island just north of us, they have 36 lighthouses. What is a lighthouse? As a seafarer, lighthouse is our protection. Lighthouse is our navigational safety.